And hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Suppress Herald. It is Monday, Columbus Day, 2024. Just for the record, I was born, it was Columbus Day. I'm going to die, it's going to be Columbus Day. I don't care what they tell you, it's Columbus Day. It's just more nonsense from the wacky left trying to discredit the country and destroy our basic foundations of our society because they want to tear it up and redo it their way. So, happy Columbus Day, everyone out there. And here we get started. And, I've come to the realization that this is just this little podcast in the basement in Maine, and it's about our local newspapers across most of the state of Maine, most of the newspapers, and they were all purchased a year ago, over a year ago now, by the National Distrust for Local News, I call it, the National Trust for Local News, which is a bunch of nonprofits that put their money into buying up newspapers across the country, local newspapers, and they're buying them up, and those nonprofits that are funding all of this are billionaires. Bill Gates, Claude Omidyar, who's another very active activist billionaire on the liberal side of things, and you've got a another one who is good old George Soros. George Soros, the same George Soros that just fast tracked the federal trade. I believe the Trade Commission, the people that approve the sale of radio stations. He just fast tracked through that group with a liberal board committee, whatever, who fast tracked him buying over 200 radio stations across the country and didn't go through its normal process. And they're in a hurry. And a lot of conservative talk radio are on those mostly AM radio stations. And you can bet they want to shut down any voices that don't agree with them. Censorship? No, this is not just censorship. This is mass propaganda. Something I want you to think about is Google is the big one, and you've got others. They make billions and billions of dollars. They're worth, $1 trillion, all these tech companies. They generate billions and billions of dollars in revenue. What's that for? What is that revenue? That revenue is advertising dollars primarily. Companies, a lot of large companies, pay for ad buys on social media companies and search engines. Google is the primary one amongst that. Let's not forget that Google was originally funded back in the day when it was first started by our own Central Intelligence Agency. Google gets billions of dollars from advertisers to influence people to buy products and services. What any, you know, hesitation in realizing if they can influence you to buy a Coca-Cola or to get a service from a service provider or to go to Amazon to buy things and so forth, and that those companies will pay them billions of dollars to do that. What makes us think that politicians aren't buying those same influencers to influence the way you think about a politician, a party, politics, policy, what's going on in the country? It's insane to think that we do not realize the level of propaganda that is happening across every media source in the country. We know MSNBC, CNN, ABC. I mean, it's been on full display during this campaign with these just abysmal performance on the debates and CNN. CNN was okay, but they promptly, right after the debate, declared Kamala a winner, and she survived and all this other crap. But the reality is, cable TV, mainstream TV, the network TV, and social media, and now local and national newspapers, all of these news sources are influencing what people think, see, hear, and do. There was a study of Google's influence on the election in 2020, and this was by a very prominent, call it scientist, I believe from Harvard, and he said it had a major impact on influencing the election and what people saw online, negative on Trump, positive on Biden at the time, and that influence had a major impact on the way people voted. We'd be fools not to realize this, but unfortunately, when you get propaganda ingrained at such a level as this, how do you get out of it? You have no source of information other than some guy in a basement, or Truth Social, or Fox. Fox isn't great at this. Fox isn't really taking this battle on. There are some sources that are, and but they're trying to be marginalized by this massive propaganda machine that is run by, and I think there are competing interests in trying to control that mass propaganda machine. We know that the deep state, CIA, the FBI, our government, call it, our unelected bureaucrats that run the government, have an interest in protecting their turf and running things. They think they are running things, and they don't really care who's in the White House. They're doing things. It's obvious if you're paying attention. They're doing things their way, and they don't want anybody, especially some guy named Donald Trump, coming along and messing around with their control of what's going on, running our lives and running and making themselves vastly wealthy and rich. And there's the Democrat Party, there's liberals, there's billionaires, and there are, call it the deep state. And there are also foreign actors that are trying to influence what's going on, all playing a propaganda machine. And us poor bastards in the middle, just an average American, is being absolutely manipulated. And there's no question of that when you look at it. I just have this little tiny part, this little newspaper chain group of papers in Maine, but it's all evident that the Suppress Herald is part of a small piece of this massive propaganda machine that goes from local papers to national papers to mainstream media to social media in a massive way. So let's just take a look at the last week in review and look at the bias that's happening here. Now, as I've talked before, I do a grading. It's 6 days a week. We get the Suppress Herald. We go to the editorial page. We look and grade the editorial page with liberal letters to the editor and editorials, conservative letters to the editor and editorials, and neutral. Neutral are one, I count political letters to the editor on people that are running for Portland, Maine City Council as neutral because they're all left. They're all liberal. There's the communists, the liberals, the socialists, and the Democrats. And that's who's ruining the city of Portland. And so it really is, I just mark that off as neutral. But when you look at the anti Trump, pro Kamala grading of that editorial page on a daily and weekly and monthly, and I've done it for over 2 years, at anywhere is from 5-1 for liberal versus conservative letters and editorials to now we're looking at close to 10-1. For this week, there were 3 conservative letters or editorials, there were 32 liberal letters or editorials. And I'll give you some examples. It's also, I'm not even counting about what's the actual content inside of this rag. This just is where it starts out. And I go from Tuesday to Sunday. So we'll just, new study, Trump would add twice as much to national debt as Harris. Well, this is provided by the nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And they say that Trump would add twice as much to the national debt as Harris. This is all just speculation. The Congressional Budget Office, which many of the people on the board of this organization, the CRFB, are past Congressional Budget Office people, past senators, congressmen, government people, but there is kind of a consistent group here. Ron Kind, he was one of the authors of the Affordable Care Act. John Kasich ran for president in 2016 against Trump, lost miserably. Nobody liked him. Former governor of Ohio, I believe he also was a congressman. John Kasich is a never Trumper. Leon Panetta, okay, he was in the Obama cabinet, and he's been also was associated with Clinton's major operator, liberal leftist. Timothy Penny, another Democrat. Maya McGinnis, or McGinnick, former Washington Compost person. Erskine Bowles, another Clinton, back in the Clinton days. So you look through who these people are. It's nonpartisan, my ass. John Kasich is a never Trumper, just like Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, they put them on the January 6th committee and said it's a nonpartisan or a bipartisan committee. Two never Trumpers, rabid never Trumpers who are just have Trump derangement syndrome so bad that they can't even function. So here you go. And, this is just an opinion piece, really, marked off as Trump's going to add more debt. It doesn't take into account the fact that in real dollars, and you'll never see this in this paper, but there are economists that have come out this week and said that in reality, the economy in the U.S. has been we've been in a recession for 2 years. If you correct for inflation. In other words, when inflation has gone up, price of goods has gone up 15, 20%, they factor that into a growing economy because the consumers are spending and all the rest of it. Well, the consumers are spending, but they're not getting as much. So in dollars, the economy may be growing, but as far as goods and services, it is not. In reality, you look around and restaurants are going out of business. They just announced this week that over 400 7-Elevens are closing their doors. Is that in the Suppress Herald? No, that's news they don't want you to see. Here's the opinion page on Wednesday. And this is a editorial writer from, they have him in there pretty regularly. And he comes from, extreme liberal. Called upon to lie for Trump, J.D. Vance stumbled. And it's just a lot of gobbledygook and pretty much garbage. But that's what you have. It's the editorial page is taken up with all liberal slanted stuff. Then you've got in the actual business section here on Friday, the bringing home the bacon. Politicians are betting that the price of breakfast strips is red meat to voters. What this is a puff piece designed to try to blunt the inflation problem that Kamala Harris and the Democrats have in this election. This is a political piece designed to blunt inflation and try to say, well, it's, things are, Trump math is wrong, but bacon has seen some sizzling price increases. According to the federal data, U.S. bacon prices peaked in October 2022 at 7.60 a pound, up 30% from October 2019. In September, bacon averaged 6.95 a pound, 25% higher than 5 years ago. That's in line with a 20% increase in overall food prices over that period. But prices for bacon are always volatile. Among other things, they're subject to weather, animal disease. Yeah, how about just plain old inflation, you morons? This is the cost of feed, the cost of fuel for running their tractors and running and moving this bacon to market, and the cost for refrigeration to run the electricity for the refrigeration on the coolers and freezers and refrigeration facilities. Everything costs more, and so prices of food are going up. But here they write a piece trying to say, yeah, it isn't so bad, and it's not Trump's, or I mean, it's not Biden's fault, it's not Kamala Harris's fault. They're doing everything they can to try and blunt the border and immigration. Puff pieces on immigrants are so positive and good for the, and I'm coming to that. And here we are. Mass deportation isn't just cruel, it's expensive. The American Immigration Council, a pro immigration think tank, issued a report. And so this is, Francis Wilkinson at the Bloomberg Opinion. Okay. Francis Wilkinson is a CIA, basically patsy, paid CIA writer at Bloomberg. I know this because that was back in the days when the whole P tapes and Steele dossier were coming out. Francis Wilkinson was one of the perpetrators of getting that out there and circulating the Steele dossier. And here he is. Mass deportation isn't just cruel, it's expensive. One thing that does come out of this, notably, the report's financial analysis is based on estimates that the undocumented population is around 11 million, plus an additional 2.3 million immigrants who were released into the U.S. between January 2023 and April 2024, just over a year. So we're talking about another 2.3 million. And they're trying to say that, this is all positive. The financial costs of mass deportation can only be enormous, with devastating effects on immigrant dependent industries, including agriculture and construction. Let me tell you what's happening with that. I talked about this previously. Right down the street from me, I see a roofing company, and then I look, and the trucks come from New Hampshire. And walking by, I do my morning walks, and there were a crew that were all huddled in the driveway, all speaking Spanish, and more than likely undocumented illegal immigrants working for a fly-by-night roofing company that came all the way to Maine. Okay, the New Hampshire border is at least an hour away, and so that is not typical work for a roofing company. I guarantee you those are illegal immigrants that are working for a roofing, fly-by-night roofing company who are going to put out of business a local roofers or local roofing companies that have been in business for, in some cases, generations, and who pay, the magic word, a living wage to their roofers. Honest jobs. And what you've got is fly-by-night illegal immigrants working for fly-by-night contractors all across the trades that are putting legitimate, American-owned, with legal workers out of business and paying minimum wage or less to illegal immigrants. Don't tell me this is positive for our economy. And that is the reality. Let me tell you something. Going back to that, mass deportation isn't just cruel, it's expensive. How expensive, really? Billions of dollars to house, just in New York City alone, illegal immigrants. 120 hotels taken over by illegal immigrants, paid for by your tax dollars, billions of dollars. New York is crushed by it, and it's happening all across the country. How much is a plane ticket? Probably 2 nights in that hotel. I can get them a plane ticket and send them back home. Don't tell me it's expensive to deport illegals. And again, we've talked about this in previous podcasts. What we're talking about is focusing on illegal immigrants that are also criminals, murderers, rapists, sexual assaults, burglars, tens of thousands of them. 400,000 convicted criminals have been released into our country by Kamala Harris. You can't tell me that the cost of that to our society is less than giving them plane tickets and sending them back. So here you have the suppress Herald and the propaganda that happens on a daily basis. Here's from Thursday. Now, this is following the disaster in North Carolina, Hurricane Helena. It's a consensus. If you get past the mainstream media cover up of the disaster of FEMA and all the rest, especially in the mountains in North Carolina, Biden condemns onslaught of lies. The president says his predecessor is spreading misinformation about U.S. disaster response. He's repeating what he's hearing directly from people in the field. Trump has been proven right again and again and again. He came down the elevator in 2015 and said, I'm running for president, and we've got to stop allowing criminals to come pouring into our country. And he was condemned for that, if you remember. Racist. He's a racist, and on and on and on. He's right. And now ICE admitted in a letter to a congressman that they have released 400,000 convicted criminals that are illegal immigrants into our country. Never going to see that. That never showed up in the Suppress Herald. And you go through and it's, Biden. Quite frankly, these lies are un-American, Biden said. Former President Trump has led this onslaught of lies. The president singled out Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, who claimed that the federal government could control the weather. Well, that's another breaking story that you're never going to see in here. Geoengineering is real. The government is trying to control the weather, and we've known about this, and it's been patted down and beat down and suppressed as nothing but a conspiracy theory. But now the cat's out of the bag. The reality is geoengineering has been happening, and we do not know the full extent of what they're doing. It's a big secret, but the word out there is that Bill Gates has been doing a lot of funding of geoengineering worldwide. Bill Gates likes to play God, and he's an extremely dangerous individual. He likes to play God with vaccinations and shots and medicine, and he experiments on African tribes and African people. We know this, and apparently he's experimenting on our atmosphere, playing God with the weather. And who knows how much impact that's having on these storms. Everybody's blaming global warming. Maybe we should be finding out if, in the name of trying to defeat global warming, they've been messing with the weather and they're the cause of these storms. So anyway, garbage on a daily basis. And here's another one. Now we'll get to the election. Hispanic women strongly favor Kamala Harris. Hispanic men are more divided, polls suggest. They're not divided. They favor Trump. That headline is so specious and just absolutely a lie. And this is how they do it. And then they've got the insert with abortionist top election issue for one young women survey finds. Same old, same old. They're trying to influence an election, not report on it. That's what propaganda is. And that's what this newspaper is all about. And this is a typical opinion page. And, what's interesting is I mentioned that there were 3 conservative letters or editorials allowed in an entire week. And this is one of them. Harris is completely unfit for the presidency. The Democratic Party, abetted by the liberal media, is in the process of perpetrating the most desperate scam on the American public in recorded history. Kamala Harris's unfitness to be president of the United States is of epic proportions. Harris has zero credibility, is a radical extremist, is wildly inconsistent in her statements and positions, is inexperienced, unaccountable, vacuous, insecure, plastic, ditzy, has a mean streak, and it is incapable of putting 2 coherent sentences together. The Biden-Harris administration has deeply divided the American people and corrupted or undermined every government institution. Voting for a Harris-Walz administration would further put our country in peril. Okay, that's pretty amazing that they actually printed that. You know why they printed that? Because they think that sounds like a unhinged conservative, and they think that makes conservatives look bad. On the same page, okay, that's a little, 3 column inches. And on the same page, an editorial, a resident of Columbia Falls, Maine. Will America ever admit to being conned by Trump? And this is allowed to be inserted. This is a letter from it's a letter basically, but they call this an editorial as opposed to a letter to the editor. So the conservatives get 3 column inches, and then the liberal gets, will America ever admit to being conned by Trump? And it's just a whole typical leftist lies, all the rest about Trump. And it's, probably 30 column inches. So you get 3, 4 column inches for conservatives and 30 for liberals. And there you go. That's propaganda. Just about done on the week, but this is just tells you what happens on a daily and weekly and monthly and yearly basis. Again, just a local newspaper and a whole set of local newspapers. They mostly dominate the entire state with newspapers, all under one roof. As banks rally, Wall Street posts another record-setting week, trying to make things look good. And then wholesale inflation remained cool last month, easing price pressures. This is in the October 12th paper. Here's on the 10th, 2 days before that, here's an alternative headline. Food and shelter costs push inflation higher than expected, which is true if you read down into this article far enough. Wholesale inflation remained cool last month, easing price pressures. Higher than they expected, still a problem, but you're not going to hear about it in the Suppress Herald because there's an election to be won. They're not going to tell you that inflation is still a problem. Here's the real problem. Core inflation, the way they measure it, they take a basket of goods and they figure out what the price is of that. People are getting hammered still because those things they only buy periodically, like going out and buying a pair of shoes, clothes, or going to the grocery store and buying something you don't normally buy, buying a steak or buying, you know, any number of different things at the store that you don't always buy. If you haven't bought it in 6 months or a year and you go in and buy it now, you're getting hammered. You're paying 10, 15, 20% or even more than what you paid 6 months ago or a year ago when you bought that product. So even though they will tell you that that product hasn't gone up much in the last so many days, the impact on your yearly budget is massive, and that's what people are feeling. And inflation, just because it's slowed down its monthly, yearly increase now, it's still at the levels that were outrageously high very quickly just a few years, 2 to 3 years ago. So everything costs a lot more. Here's another good little one. And this is the Musk attack. Elon Musk, first, he had the audacity to expose the FBI, the State Department, the deep state, basically, and the liberals and the Democrats for what they were doing with basically suppressing information. It's called censorship at X, formerly known as Twitter, the Twitter files. They will never forgive him for that. He has been under fire at Tesla. He has been under fire at his SpaceX organization. They've got some lawsuit against him for environmental something on his Texas SpaceX facility. And now Starlink. For Musk's Starlink service, storms are an opportunity. Trying to make him look like an opportunist. He was bringing Starlink to North Carolina mountains where they have no communication. He tried to bring them there. They refused to transport them in until he contacted Pete Buttigieg, and apparently Pete Buttigieg said, I think I better do this. He's not stupid. And so they changed course. But this is an article about Starlink. And the kerfuffles have underscored the growing importance of Musk's satellites, even as the tech figure, the world's richest person, remains better known to the public for his Tesla electric cars and his social media antics. Yeah, antics. That tells you exactly what they think. His social media antics. You exposed the deep state and the Justice Department and the Injustice Department, I should say, and others to what you were up to with the Twitter files. And so they're out to get him. And it's, talking about Starlink, what they don't really get into here is that Starlink was denied a contract to bring internet service to rural America. Billions of dollars were funded. And they get into this a little bit here, but they are not. Musk and Republican lawmakers are now blaming the Biden administration for holding the company back. The House Oversight Committee's chairman, Representative James Comer, announced Monday that his committee is probing whether the Federal Communications Commission in 2022 block of nearly $1 billion in federal grants to Starlink for rural internet was driven by politics. Well, obviously it was. They're trying to say that Starlink wasn't fast enough. Meanwhile, they earmarked billions and billions of dollars for rural internet and accomplished absolutely nothing. Just like they put billions of dollars to build out infrastructure for electric charging stations for electric vehicles and built like six charging facilities, charging locations, I don't know, a handful of charging locations for billions of dollars. Utter failure. Meanwhile, Starlink could have brought internet to hundreds of thousands or millions of people, and they denied it because it was Musk to punish him. This is what we have. That's not what you read in the Suppress Herald. It's just really interesting. And then I'm going to finish with, because we're in this major political battle going on. This is in the Sunday Suppress Herald and the politics page. Candidates take different paths in tied race. Trump declined Fox News's invitation to another presidential debate within hours of the offer this week, giving up a potential audience of about 75 million Americans. He announced rallies in California and New York, uncompetitive states where no Republican has won an electoral vote in 35 years. In other words, they're trying to dismiss it and say he's a fool. He's going to win the popular vote. Mark my words. They're going to have a problem with that. He's also going to win the Electoral College. Several people close to Harris conceded they had lost some momentum and needed something to stir the race up. Harris advisors say they need more ad spending, more paid canvassing, more volunteer energy, more media placements, more surrogates, and more activity from their candidates on bigger platforms. They need something. They admitted that they're screwed. And this is an article, a paragraph that's kind of the clincher here. The more people see the real Kamala Harris and the real Tim Walz, the more that I believe they will do the comparison and vote for her. Representative Debbie Dingbat, Democrat from Michigan, said, referring to the nominee and her running mate, the Minnesota governor. This isn't reporting. This is that propaganda. On the same page, they have a whole huge section. Well, there's report Harris is in good health. And then they say Trump won't share his. Harris is in good health. Yeah, maybe not mentally, but she's, she can run around. But meanwhile, Trump's doing 2 or 3 rallies a day, running all over the country, doing interviews, doing podcasts. And I don't think there's any problem with his health, or his mental acuity. But there's that. That's a puff piece on Harris's health. Just there's no reason to put that in there. You could have done that. It's a whole column. You could have put it in there in 3 minutes, 3 sentences. But it's really designed to advance her campaign and make her look better. And then you've got this whole section, the Republicans endorsing Harris. And it lists out Dick and Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Jimmy McCain, Bush, Romney, and McCain staffers, White House lawyers, Jeff Flake. Yeah, he's a Flake, all right. He's a never Trumper. These are all never Trumpers. Alberto Gonzalez, who was the Attorney General under Bush, and these are never Trumpers. Who cares? There's no article in here, equal article, talking about the people that are endorsing Trump. Everybody knows RFK Jr. Tulsi Gabbard ran for president as a Democrat and is actually legitimate and is very articulate, well spoken, a former congresswoman from Ohio and a candidate for president, veteran. It's crazy, but that's what you get. You get that article in there because for one reason, tip the scales, propagandize, make people think, oh yeah, Kamala's got all this support from Republicans. I can't tell you how many Democrats are coming out. These are people that are former Democrats, former funders of Democrats, billionaires and beyond that are coming out for Trump. But you will never hear about it because the propaganda machine will make sure that you don't. So here we are on Columbus Day, and we finished another week. Everything's the same. Nothing changes. The Suppress Herald and the media in general are doing their job to the best of their ability to basically rob you of the information you need to make an informed decision about an election and to figure out what's going on in the world. Don't buy the propaganda. And just remember, politics is local, and so is propaganda. Have a great week.